For Caper, we did feel like there wasn't a singular brand that was consistently telling great stories and kind of building the character universe in food and restaurants and hospitality. It felt a bit more utility and not necessarily the storytelling aspect that we all know exists in this world because there's so many rich characters and so many interesting stories. So much of what we wanted to be at Caper is a little bit unexpected in terms of our editorial and our talent and our brand partners and things like that, because we just need to make sure we are differentiating. I think if we ended up just sort of building what's already been done in the space, then that would be a total failure. We have to just be different and new and really tell the stories that we want to tell. And that is where and how Caper was born.
Welcome back to the Perfect Bite podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Perkins. Any regular listeners know now that the Perfect Bite is not only a perfect bite of founders across the food and bev industry, but that I started it because it's a bit of a perfect bite of my career to date. From lifestyle journalist to startup founder to now working with folks in F&B. You can then imagine how excited I was to hear about today's guest's new media company. It's focused on the business and relationships of the food industry, a real peek behind the curtain of what's going on. And what's even cooler is that they're treating the brand like a tech startup, offering team members equity and a chance to build from the ground up. It's going to be tough to pare down any of my questions. Please welcome CEO and co-founder of Caper, Max Tcheyan. Max, hi.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks so much for being on. I'm so happy we were able to connect. You were so nice about getting back to me so quickly. And I just can't wait for everyone to hear about this because I think this is what we've really needed in terms of food media or even just the future of what lifestyle media is going to look like.
That's great to hear. I'm so glad it's resonating with you and a lot of the media world. So no, thrilled to hear that. And we're really excited about what we're building at Caper.
100%. Well, I can't wait to get into it, especially around the inspiration of why you're doing things so differently. I always love to take things back here first. Tell us about when you first fell in love with food. What was eating and cooking like in your household growing up?
Well, I don't know if I've been asked that too much, actually. So I appreciate it. I mean, I am the son of a Northern Italian woman. My mom is from Imola, which is a small town outside of Bologna in Northern Italy. So cooking was a very active part of our household. It goes up a layer further to my grandmother, and she was an amazing cook. Passed a lot of that down to my mother. But I'd say I have a strong recollection of the sort of Sunday scene at my grandparents' house, in New York, with just like plate after plate, and then constantly going home with tons and tons of leftovers. And again, her bologna is second to none, and she'd even freeze a ton of it and send it to me in college. And looking back, I would always say I think I should just start selling this actually. And now that's something that people do, I think, much more often. Anyway, so a big part of our household, certainly being from that part of the world. And that was a little bit of the inspiration too for the name Caper, in the end. And we really liked this sort of double entendre of it, the ingredient, but then also, which was, sort of a sacred ingredient in my household as well. But then also the sort of, adventure and escapade definition of it that we think applies well to the world that we're covering.
Absolutely. And I loved that too. It's like Caper, it makes complete sense. Our happy, salty little friends. And of course, that idea of you're going to go on a real adventure with the stories that you all are reporting on. I have to ask, I just met a gal who's American who moved to Bologna a couple of years ago. And she shared a recipe, Frigione. Did you ever have that growing up? It looks incredible. These nice stewed down onions in tomato sauce. You put it over a bread. It looks just so simple. I have to try it.
Yeah, that sounds great. It sounds like a lot of the recipes in that part of the world, I think, but I haven't had that specifically, or maybe I have and I just didn't know that's what it was called.
Yeah. But it's great that you had that basis here. You didn't end up going into food immediately or even the lifestyle side of things. So tell us a little bit more about your career journey. Why did you want to go into media business itself? You found yourself in growth roles at some really incredible outlets like Bleacher Report and The Athletic. What do you think really drew you in here?
Well, I did work in a lot of restaurants growing up. I
Okay.
even delivered Chinese food at one point in
Love
my
it.
hometown, which was like before Google Maps and everything. So I kind of remember a summer of like driving around and calling friends for directions, actually, and like not realizing you don't actually know all the street names, which was sort of funny and just like a really sweaty summer. But my career journey was, I was very into sports. I played a lot of sports growing up, and then through college played lacrosse, and was sort of determined to kind of go into the sports world in some way, and was on this law school track. Actually went to law school for a couple of weeks, and then I dropped out, and I ended up joining a startup called Bleacher Report, which was a very small shop, 5 people in a room, trying to build a new media property as the internet was really, or as journalism and media was really digitizing. And so this was like 2007, 2008 in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And I was a media person, school papers and things like that. Certainly read a lot, consumed a lot of news and media, and really fell in love with the startup scene, with media as the ecosystem. I thought that was just such a great blend for me, especially kind of, I think probably, thinking I was going to go down sort of this law school track, and then feeling like that wasn't quite right at the time, and wanting to really have a lot more sort of flexibility and agency in terms of what I was doing. And then I think, again, just that ecosystem of like small company, having a lot of impact on what you're working on and feeling that very, very directly was really enthralling for me. And so that's really where it all started. And I was in the Bay, and there was this shared mission to build a media company at Bleacher, and I did that, and really sort of became this, growth marketing person. Before that was really even a term, growth hacking, that type of world. And this goes back to like, V1 of Facebook advertising, and
Gosh.
when you could acquire users for like really, pennies at the time. And when the platform was just like, so buggy and like so frustrating to work on, but it was actually very cost effective too. And so I played that kind of marketing role, community, still staying connected to editorial. I remember I was doing interviews at the time with sports
Great.
media personalities that I really admired. And that was 4 or 5 years. Bleacher Report, exited successfully, sold it to Time Warner Turner Sports. And suddenly I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I really enjoyed this, and like, can actually like make a little bit of money doing it, and kind of got addicted to that sort of cycle. And I wanted to keep taking risks like that in my career. I do remember moving back to New York after Bleacher Report and sort of getting in line at Turner, because I sort of thought I had to go to New York and become a media executive. And then I was like, actually, no, I think I'm going to go back to San Francisco and stay in startup land. And that's what I did, and ended up joining Brad Griffith, who had just started Game Time, which is an app for sports and concert tickets, still around, still really successful. And that's where I like sort of really cut my teeth as a user acquisition person and expert, because I had a chance to work with some really great budgets and acquire users for an app across, really every platform. And that was sort of my departure from media. But, as we both know, no one really ever gets out of media. It's the mob. You just, keep getting
Just
pulled
different
back
roles.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And startups too.
Yeah.
Like I will say, unless you're like, no, I'm done with this. No one talk to me ever again. I'm going corporate. Just like you said, you cannot get enough once you
Yeah.
started it.
Yeah, it's such a fun place to build. And then, so from there, an angel investor in The Athletic reached out, who I knew, and said, hey, you should take a look at this. Your user acquisition background, your sports media background lent itself really well to this. The Athletic was something I think we really wanted to build at the end of our time at Bleacher, but the model just wasn't right. It was still a pure advertising play model. And then The Athletic was a pure subscription model. That was just a really amazing experience, how we effectively went to market over and over and over again across the United States and then abroad, and grew that company. And again, was fortunate to have an exit when that eventually sold to the New York Times. And then I was really, after sort of being a back early stage employee, like a 0 to 5 employee, I was very determined to found something. And I went to TPG, a private equity firm, and did an entrepreneur in residence stint. Met my co-founders, Joe and John, there for Puck. And that's really where, we concepted and ultimately launched Puck out of. And that kind of took me out of the sports world and more into, Puck covers Hollywood and fashion and art and business and politics. We actually did eventually add a, business of sports section, but a lot of the DNA from Puck came from the business model of The Athletic, where we wanted to have subscription at its core. We wanted to be very talent-led, have the journalists very forward and leading the brand in terms of what we were building. And again, for 4 years there, I think you can sort of see how the chapters turn for me with each company. And I felt like, now I'll get us to the topic of the day here with Caper, but I felt like, this model that really had worked with The Athletic and then with Puck in some different ways was just a really fun way to build media companies. And I started thinking about where to go and build next. And food really jumped out in a few different ways. One, that the landscape felt a bit like sports media did in 2016, 17, when The Athletic was starting. And by that, I mean, it was a lot of lists and rankings and service journalism.
Opinion pieces.
Yeah, and felt like there wasn't necessarily which is all designed to really play the search game, ultimately. And so that doesn't always support, really quality journalism. And so feeling like that was an interesting pattern recognition opportunity. And then also a lot of how we, then covered some of the worlds that we touched on at Puck in terms of being more of a B2B play, where we're speaking and really offering the insider story to that world. And when I looked at B2B on the food media side, it felt a bit more like utility for proprietors and not necessarily the storytelling aspect that we all know exists in this world, because there's so many rich characters and so many interesting stories. So that was really the development of the thesis. I ended up partnering with Ancinas, who I worked with at Puck, and we took that thesis to market around this prosumer audience, that if we serve the industry class of food and restaurants and hospitality incredibly well, it should bleed over to a consumer that really just wants to gain greater intimacy to the places that they are dining out for. And that is where and how Caper was born. Boy, that was long.
You're such a beautiful storyteller that I'm like, oh, this is so great talking to someone who loves storytelling and writing and interviewing themselves. Because I'm like, great, you just took a bunch of my questions that sometimes I'm usually chatting with folks where I'm like, hey, now let's talk about this part, and really pulling it out of them. I mean, so many points from that right here. One, you got the absolute best version of startups and journalism all in one. I mean, you don't go into either or into food or hospitality being like, I'm going to make money off of this. Every industry I have fallen in love with, I'm like, it's usually not the game. You're not there to make tons and tons of money. And yet you somehow were able to have these incredible success stories where you were able to blend your creativity with your marketing brain side of things and look at things really strategically. I have to ask, so you went from looking at things only from, say, an advertising play model in terms of revenue streams, you went to subscription. Did you see that any one of those was better than the other in terms of growth?
Well, it really was a timing thing, like it's sort of when journalism and everything was really going online, advertising. Subscription sort of was the original business model. We all subscribed to newspapers a long time ago, and got them physically delivered, and then that went away and everything went digital, and that advertising play began to really take shape. It then, bounced back to subscription. So it is sort of interesting to think about. Bleacher was, purely advertising, and then The Athletic was purely subscription. And then we started Puck, and it was like, oh, well, why don't we just have both of these and have it, multiple revenue streams from day one. So when pure subscription works, it's hard to argue that anything is better than that, just because of the recurring revenue that comes from that and what that gives you the freedom to do with the business. So always going to sort of be bullish on that, although it is in media, as you know, it's very hard to get people to pay for quality work. So it's necessary, I think, really to have the mix in the end. But yeah, I would love if, again, we could only have one. But I think you can do things now too on the advertising side that can be really additive when you think about events and even signaling to
Yes.
an audience that they're in the right place when they're, sort of being advertised to with the right partners. And I just think like brand partners are also like getting more and more creative and willing to explore and realizing that they, have to evolve as well to reach audience in different ways. Like that's something that I'm probably doing more of now with Caper than I have ever done before. And it's been just really fun and interesting and a pretty, steep learning curve to really try to understand that world and again, bring on the right partners alongside the core subscription that's happening at Caper.
Yeah. And I mean, I think advertorial has just evolved so beautifully over, say, the last 10 to 15 years as well. I remember when I was in print, there were times we'd have an advertiser that I was like, there is no way that I would personally ever be recommending X, Y, and Z in Chicago, right? Like, it would be like, well, they paid for a spot, so you got to do it.
Yeah.
Versus now it's a lot more thoughtful. I mean, yesterday's newsletter, you had Loewe as your ad partner there, and it really signaled to me like, okay, this is a class. This is like a very interesting media perspective we're going to be looking at here, that this is going to be intelligent, and it's for folks who are excited to, I think, push themselves as well when you see what I think is a very cool fashion brand being paired alongside food.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I mean, first of all, it was amazing that they
Oh my God.
worked.
How fun is that? Yeah, you were like, oh my gosh, Loewe, like
Yeah.
you can still get excited about things that are technically outside the industry.
Definitely. It looks great. It's absolutely a signal that we wanted to send, along with the brand design that we really invested in. Even the name choice, I think we were sort of in another direction. I thought Caper elevated the brand and gave us more flexibility to elevate and think about who we're approaching from an audience standpoint. And then sort of I think the signal of having, a luxury brand out the gate was really important and unexpected too. I think like so much of what we want to be at Caper is a little bit unexpected in terms of our, editorial and our talent and our brand partners and things like that, because we just need to make sure we are differentiating. I think if we ended up just sort of building what's already been done in the space, then that would be a total failure. Like we have to just be different and new and really tell the stories that we want to tell. And so, yeah, no, really was a great start there and having them as a partner. And I think, again, gave it the right signal in terms of who we want to be speaking to.
Absolutely. So I'm sure that as you were building Puck, you were getting compared to, say, Vanity Fair and publications along those lines. What do you think that Caper is being compared to, if anything? Because I don't know if there really is a singular outlet that's covering food and hospitality in the way that you all are aspiring to. And also, why do you think that it's taken so long for, just more outlets and more regular stories to be done as deeply as Caper is hoping to when it comes to covering food this way? Again, going beyond just listicles and reviews. And honestly, don't even get me started on Eater these days. Like, especially as a Chicagoan, I have not been pleased with them this last year after what happened with A-Shock and just the change-ups that's been happening here. It just feels like it's not the place it used to be.
Yeah, I think it's really just it's business model related more than
Yeah.
anything. Again,
It's tough.
subscription, yes, it is tough. Subscription can support, again, a different investment in storytelling and journalism. So I think it just actually comes down to that more than anything. And for Caper, again, we did feel like there wasn't a singular brand that was consistently telling great stories and kind of building the character universe in food and restaurants and hospitality. And that's definitely, that's Vanity Fair, that's Puck. Like there is a lot of that DNA in it for sure. But when we think about this power triangle a lot of what our audience strategy is and how we want to cover the world, and the parallel to Hollywood is very, very apparent. And not just because like it's, there's a lot of status to this world, right? And maybe it's the most accessible way to express taste, right? Like going out to eat at a nice restaurant and then telling people that you went there is sort of a lot more accessible than putting, an expensive piece of art on the wall or something like that. And this power triangle, though, is again, who are the producers, actors, and agents in this world, right? And we think about these hospitality groups quite a bit. I think to me, like, I just am very, very curious about them and just think they are incredible businesses led by true, like, artists and creative and business savvy folks. And I'm like, what is going on in these places that are becoming huge businesses too, by the way? It's not lifestyle. This is big business. And so we were thinking about those groups a lot and really beginning to kind of excavate them and understand them and profile them and know who's inside the walls there and the strategic decisions they're making. Because again, everybody knows who's at the very top of those places, right? It's Danny Myers, but what's this executive class? So, like, that's, I think, the black box that I'm, truly interested in understanding. And those people, the world is so connected. They're going on and doing lots of different things. So that's really the, producer class that we think about. The agents, the actors, are the chefs in the restaurants, I think, themselves. So really, again, calling them out, and not just the sort of the living legends. There's an up and coming class of, creator, chef, and operator that are entering this world. And I think people are getting really creative in terms of how they go into it. And more people, I think, are entering the space in that regard. And then this agent class is, I actually think, so fascinating in this world because it's everything from comms to real estate to, advising on ingredients and menus and what goes on the walls and the design. And these people, some of them are the comms groups, but some of them are these other behind the scene players that really go by different titles in terms of consultants or advisors or, growth marketers, things like that. And I just think that, like, when we think about this world, it is about appealing to that industry class in each of those sort of categories of the triangle that just felt like a real opportunity actually to cover. And I didn't think, and sort of taking it all the way back to your question here, is like, I just didn't think that there was this singular brand that was appealing to all of those and telling their stories and celebrating a lot of those stories as well. And again, it's very business model focused. So subscription, I think, can support that discovery a lot more effectively.
Absolutely. I mean, when you were speaking about these different categories of folks, again, yeah, I want to know the publicists and I want to know the agents who are behind these up and coming chefs and these restaurateurs that are getting their folks out there. What is working well for them? It also reminds me of, say, the one-off stories we do for modern luxury around, say, the interior design groups behind your favorite restaurants and how they create these partnerships and really the atmosphere that you feel immediately when you walk through the door. So I can't wait to see more of that here. Why did you decide also to have Caper separate from Puck? Because it could have seemed like this is just like a natural category that could be folded in, just like the sports and the fashion and the Hollywood side of things. Why did you think it was so important for it to be its own entity?
Well, for me, it was about wanting to just to go and build something new.
You're like, it's time to do this again.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there is sort of an advantage to being category specific. You think about, again, the athletic, there was this common denominator of sports. Again, the common denominator here is food. I think we're going to go edit through some other categories. So real estate, media, business, art, culture. And it's going to all take the reader through that lens into food and restaurants and hospitality. So it was a little bit more just wanting to build and take this model, apply it to a new world and be category specific. But I mean, Puck tells some of these stories. I see it, Airmail and Puck are certainly doing some of this stuff in a really great way. I saw the horses story the other day in Airmail. I thought that was really well done. So, I think the food media ecosystem is really interesting right now. And I do sort of feel like maybe we were just a tiny bit early, but quickly there are lots and lots of really interesting outlets springing up, I think saying some very, very similar things to what we are doing. So yeah, I think that was really my reason for going and doing this, as a new brand.
Yes, absolutely. And also, so speaking of starting up something new, your founding staff, I like to say it's really an Avengers assembly that we've got going on here in terms of their background. You've got the New Yorker, the New York Times, ArtNet, Eater, Bon Appetit. Why did you decide upon this particular group of folks as your starting staff here? And these early stage, if we're talking startup terms, their employee numbers 1 through 5. How did you also convince them to go against the institutional grain and a business model and a salary model that they were used to?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I truly believe we have our founding journalists are three incredibly unique talents. Was so just happy that we were and proud that we were able to gain their partnership to do this. This concept has resonated, I think, with a lot of the journalist class. Certainly. I think how we landed with Emma Orlo, who was previously at Eater, Chris Crowley, who was at Grub Street, and Annie Armstrong, who was at ArtNet. I think at the core, we just knew we needed top level, capital J journalists that were also willing to evolve and take risk and had some level of entrepreneurship in them. I think that's just a really important part of building in new media is the class of author that has a risk profile and wants to bet on themselves and can be positioned in a business model that doesn't require them to be, single operator, one person media company, which is incredibly difficult. So much respect to, everyone that's doing that. Yeah, I know, looking at you. Exactly. But also it knows that they want more freedom and more upside than being a legacy institution. And I think that's sort of the barbell in media. And I continue to believe that building in the middle can be a way to effectively build new brands. And, Chris, Emma give us amazing connectivity in the space, have so much experience there. It's like, I've had these moments where I'm in conversation with them and they are just riffing on the innate knowledge they have about this world and the way that they are connecting the dots, and it's encyclopedic, and then how they connect the dots in the background. It's so amazing. And we're like, get that on the page, like this conversation just has to be on the page. And then Annie, I think, represents sort of another part of the strategy as well, where it's having non-previously endemic food talent coming and putting their attention onto this world. And so Annie comes from the art space and now is focused on this world. But that audience crossover, I think, is real, right? And I think this common denominator of food is something that it's a lived and shared experience that we can all relate to. I think by and large, most people enjoy reading about these places that they go or want to go or just have knowledge of. Again, the character study and the stories that come out of them are incredibly interesting. But I think we want to continue to think about how category expertise comes from outside this world and points towards it. And I think that can be done through real estate, and that can be done through sports and, fashion and media. On food media is something I really like to talk about or think about, because I think that's
the inception here.
Kind of breaks your brain a little bit, but I think it's just such a rabid space. Why is Ray Allis showing up at the Ryder Cup, Coco Doc at the US? And I think these are all really, really interesting stories, ultimately about the business of these places. And you could approach it with, a food media person, or you can approach it with a category expert that comes from outside of it. And I think both ways can be effective, but that is, again, just how we wanted to start with that, again, that connectivity in the space. And then also beginning to think about how we, work with category experts in other parts of media that then can turn their attention here. And we're doing that as well on the contributor side. So you're seeing some interesting names and voices pop up.
Already.
Yeah, that was so cool. Yeah, Graydon has been just an absolute, friend of the brand and mentor, and it was so cool to see him and have him publish on Waverly, and he's part of his life, in this world. So we want to continue to do that. And again, it goes back to what we were saying, earlier about just really differentiating and being a little unexpected. And I think if you see, as an audience person, if you see a name that you really respect and have read on other topics, and then you see them talking about this world, you're like, oh, that's like, I think there's a chance you will tune in for that.
Yes, I don't think it's going to be you don't have 30 years in this one single category. What do you know? I think this is such a beautiful new opportunity. You all are going about this in such a smart and thoughtful way. Again, when I think of someone like Annie who says, hey, I haven't covered just food forever, but I have this certain lens and this ability to storytelling. It's also smart from a startup perspective. If every single person came in with the exact same background and thought the exact same way, you're never going to move forward. You're never going to have anything different, and you're going to get stuck in the same places. So it's always important to have a few people who have different experiences so that you can say, what are we not thinking about? What is the angle for either a story or for even a business decision on how to move things forward? And I appreciate that you're not just putting respect on these folks' names, names, you're putting money behind them. And it's been needed for so long. Again, I don't think that everyone has to be a starving artist. No one should have to be. And I'm in a household, we are not only media, we are startups. And so we rent, we are not like our parents' generation where we've been able to buy property as our form of potential wealth one day. It's, hey, we're buying equity and we've got equity in our portcos and just hoping, let's see how it pays off. And so giving journalists the same ability to say, no, I am an entrepreneur in that sense, but also that support it's a great opportunity. So thank you. Thank you for being a model for everyone else here.
That's nice of you to say. I mean, this group, everyone is really, they are partners in this business. Again, they're equitized. They have bonuses tied to revenue goals, participation on the IP side. And it's very important that they understand the business, as intimately as we are, because that's actually the opportunity too. Like, I think there was a long time in media where this sort of separation of, business and creative, and that never really crossed. And they need to, it's going to make them more dangerous in their career, at Caper and beyond. And that's actually really, really important. So they're getting read in, and hopefully will continue to level up sort of their education on how the business side of Caper runs.
Absolutely. And so, again, you mentioned the bonuses as well. I think if there wasn't equity involved, you could risk almost compromising integrity of people being like, okay, I've got to hit certain numbers. What can I do to get as many views as possible, as much traffic as possible so that I can go after that money? But I think because of the types of folks that you purposely started this with and are setting the scene with, then you're going to, from the top down, have this element of, yeah, that's awesome if that does happen, but don't compromise what you're putting stories out about, how you're going about it, just so that you can move as quickly as possible. I'm thinking like the 2015 era of like, I loved like at that age, like reading Pop Sugar, but those folks had to be putting out so many pieces each day to be hitting quota. And you just burn out and you're not getting paid on top of it. Like, of course, we've had to see a revolution here.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's the business model too, where that was designed for volume and quantity to feed search algorithms and sell impressions off of that volume, advertising wise. And again, that's why it's so important to build the subscription base that again affords you that recurring revenue stream. And yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways too, though, it is like we do want them to bring their instincts. I think the right incentives can go a long way, but their instincts about what to be covering. We certainly have some hypotheses we want to test editorially in terms of like, if we cover this, then it will, bring on a certain type of subscriber in terms of our audience strategy. But it's a multiplayer game in that way.
Absolutely. That was going to be my next question for you was how are you targeting your audience members here? So what are you thinking about in terms of growth? What's the type of content that you all are putting out there or marketing strategy that you have? And what do you think is, as I like to call them, your storytelling secret ingredient in terms of reaching those folks?
Yeah, it is that triangle I was mentioning. I think those are the areas of the industry that to me feel like wedge in opportunities, these going deeper into these hospitality groups and understanding them better, the, kind of being early on the band with chefs and restaurateurs and operators. Like, I think there's a lot of up and comers entering the space, and can we introduce them and then continue to chronicle them, and the ups and the downs. Like, I think that's what makes coverage interesting, right? And then again, this aging class, which I do find so fascinating because they are influencing business and culture in a lot of ways that do not really present that publicly. There are folks that are remaking New York's, landscape and city landscapes and cultural areas of the city and other cities. And so that's, again, we really want to tell their stories, cover them, and, in doing so, be the sort of paper of record for the industry class. And that's the strategy. There is some like sneaky distribution in that world too. These like chefs and restaurateurs are sort of, they are artists and celebrities in their own right. And is that sort of an opportunity on the distribution side? Certainly the talent and our partners and our contributor base all represent some level of distribution as well. And we're growing our own actively over time and owning that audience through a newsletter first strategy. So yeah, there's a lot of things to do. I think our events side is also a big part of this business. We have this as part of the upper tier subscription. You get access to our events every single month. And there's the first up kind of underground chef competition that we're hosting with top chefs around the city in kind of these undisclosed, unexpected locations. It's a pretty amazing event where you end up getting very up close and personal with these chef de cuisines from around the city. And it's incredibly competitive. There are real, cash prizes. And it's kind of got this like underground rap battle meets like Top Chef vibe, which is just so cool and so fun. And so I think we're going to be doing those pretty regularly. And I think that will also lend to some content that will distribute well in terms of what's being on display there.
I like it because you're only going to get this information or access to these moments through Caper. And it's that FOMO. I think that's part of it here. You'll see me signing up for my pro subscription and flying in.
Amazing. Please. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So last few questions here. How do you want to see Caper growing? You're talking about, you've launched out in New York, you're very New York based right now. How do you want to see coverage across the country continue to grow? And what do you think is coming up for the future here?
Yeah, we are somewhat New York centric. The whole team is here. A lot of our stories are starting here. And in many ways, like a New York restaurant story is kind of a national story. Right. But I think it's about, two things. One is that we do have a contributor base that is around the country, even in different parts of the world, that are, going to be dropping in stories from different food capitals and non-food capitals, which are also interesting too. Like you're seeing chefs go to these other cities because they can gain more runway and then experiment and have more time to develop concepts. So that's one side of it, just on the contributor base. But the other side is going back to the audience strategy, anchoring and the content strategy of, anchoring the story in real estate or media or art or business, right, versus anchoring in the city. And I think by doing that, then the story can come from anywhere. You can spoke out to any part of the world versus sending the audience a signal that, hey, we cover, San Francisco, and so only read this if you're interested in San Francisco. I think it's kind of turned on its head a bit to say, hey, this is a business story and it could have taken place anywhere. So that's sort of what will draw you in. So that's a little bit of it. And I think we can travel well with our core team, but also with this contributor base.
Smart. Now, are you thinking about podcasts for the future, just like you did for Puck? Wink.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, definitely. And that's probably a back half of this year item that we really want to begin to concept and develop. So that's part of it. And, the video podcast strategy. I think video in general is something that we will probably do a little bit more of than we had with some of the other shops that I helped build. And just because, again, this world lends so well to it. And then again, like the events package and continuing to be really creative about how we activate that side of it.
Sorry. Now, I always like to ask this as we wrap up here and get to the world's best and hardest question. You've had multiple business babies at this point. What's one piece of advice that you'd like to give someone who's looking to do something entrepreneurial themselves, whether it's related to food, media, or anything else?
Gosh, I mean, it sounds so cliche, but it's a lot of the journey is the reward part of it. I think it's just incredibly fun and invigorating to build and kind of push yourself outside of your comfort zone and do hard things. And like, that's really where you learn the most and grow the most. So I don't know what the quote is, like everything good is on the other side of your comfort zone or something like that. But I do firmly believe that. And then, the hardest thing is to start. Like that's it. And it can be very small and incremental to begin with. So I don't know, hopefully that's helpful.
It is. It's a reminder that you are going to have tough days. You're going to have tough hours out of every single day. It is the full roller coaster experience, but this is the reward. Like you said, you can't push for the exit, push for something amazing to happen, but it's not guaranteed. But what we have right now and what we're doing right now is. So take advantage of it. All right, Max. So here we are. It always makes me sad, but excited to be at this point. Is a reminder for folks, this is the perfect bite. It's a perfect bite of our folks who bring us value across the food and bev industry, but also because we have our own perfect bites. So a recipe, a moment, something you ate that you're never going to forget and always brings a smile to your face. So Max, what is your perfect
Yeah.
bite? I know, world's best
Oh
and
my God,
hardest question.
I wish I'd prepared for the thing that pops into my brain right now
Good.
is the first time I had Lucali's pizza in Brooklyn here.
Ooh,
That actually just popped into my brain. And I feel like I've only been there twice, but I feel like it sort of stayed on my mind and wanting to go back and sort of confirm that that first bite was that good. So I will hold that up as the one for me and kind of really, if I had to rank, New York City pizza, that's where I'd also put at the top.
wow. Ooh, which is tough. And
Mm.
I appreciate, that's what I like about these answers is it does not have to be this incredible moment from a, tasting course and it cost this much money and it was so over the top. It could be,
Yeah.
but
No,
it really is what
BYOB,
your instinct
bottle of
is.
wine and a pizza there.
That's what's
And,
up.
the other part is like, I mean, what's funny is that it's actually not about the food kind of, it's about these spaces and the
Yeah.
food is the B-roll in so many ways. And so much of it is just tied to the room that you're in, right? Where you're going to then be transported back and the food is going to be part of it, but I think can be absolutely enhanced by just sort of feeling cool and comfortable and in the right place at the right time, at the right temperature. And that is like probably the basis for that for my answer as well. Just like, loving that room. It's really intimate. It's a freezing night in January in New York City and kind of getting warmed up by that.
And you smiled. You had that first bite and you were like, ah. So it sounds like exactly
It
that
was
caper's
hyped too.
delivery.
It was so hyped, and like it didn't like it's kind of rare that anything meets or exceeds expectations now, right? And
Oh,
so
yeah.
it did that, and then I think that's probably also why it's pretty memorable for me.
Good. And I always find the answers are really revealing about each guest as well. So this feels like you. It feels like caper.
Yes.
Max, thank you again so much for your time. This has been such a pleasure. I could talk to you for hours. I just can't wait to follow along the journey and everything you all are doing. Can you please let listeners know where to find you? So social accounts, the website, and how they can sign up and anything else.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much, Sarah. It's great chatting with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very easy to talk to and great conversation. So caper.media is where you can go and sign up for what we're doing and you'll find membership there. There's 2 tiers, but you can also subscribe and get some of the content for free. And then you can find me on LinkedIn. My last name is very difficult to pronounce and spell, but you can put it, in the show notes.
Yes.
And you can find me there. And then I'm on Instagram, MT So similar thing. I don't spell it out there, but you can find me in both those spots.
Awesome. We'll make sure to include all that in the show notes. Thanks again, Max.
Right.
And
Yeah,
everyone,
thank you, Sarah.
thanks so much for listening in. You are listening to Max Tcheyan's Perfect Bite.
Thanks for tuning in to The Perfect Bite today. You can listen to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks in advance for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. You can follow The Perfect Bite on social media @PerfectBitePod. Now go get something good to eat.